There is a version of you that exists only online. She is consistent, she is curated, she knows her colors, her fonts, her content pillars. She posts at optimal times, she uses the right hashtags. She studies her analytics like a language she is slowly learning to speak fluently. She adjusts her tone when engagement drops. She pivots her content when a particular format stops performing. She is responsive, adaptive, strategic. She is, in every measurable sense, good at this, and she is slowly hollowing you out from the inside. This is the conversation the algorithm does not want you to have, because the algorithm does not need you, it needs your behavior. It needs your posting frequency, your engagement patterns, your willingness to keep showing up and feeding the machine with content that has been unconsciously shaped by what the machine rewarded last time. The algorithm is not your audience. It is not your collaborator. It is a sorting mechanism that has no interest in whether the content it amplifies is true, meaningful, or actually yours. It only measures what spreads. And what spreads in the attention economy is almost never what is most real. It is what is most stimulating, most provocative, most emotionally triggering, or most perfectly calibrated to the particular dopamine signature of a specific user base at a specific moment in time. When you spend enough time performing for that mechanism, something quiet and serious begins to happen. The gap between who you are and who you are performing starts to widen, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the small daily choices about what to post and what to leave out, what to say and how to soften it, which version of a story to tell and which details to drop because they would complicate the narrative your audience has come to expect from you. Every one of those choices is a tiny act of self-editing. And self-editing, when it becomes the primary mode through which you relate to your own creative output, does not just shape your content, it shapes your sense of what is expressible. Over time, the edited version starts to feel like the real version, and the unedited you, the one with the inconvenient opinions and the unresolved feelings and the ideas that do not fit neatly into a content category, starts to feel like a liability. This episode is about the transition out of that, not as a rejection of strategy or ambition or building something meaningful online, but as a reclamation of the foundation those things have to be built on. Because here is the truth that gets buried underneath all the content advice. The most durable, most influential, most genuinely powerful presences in the digital space are not the ones who became the most skilled at performing for the algorithm. They are the ones who became so grounded in who they actually are that the algorithm eventually had to come to them. That is not a motivational statement. It is a structural observation. And to understand why it is true, you need to understand something about how attention actually works in an oversaturated digital environment. You are competing for attention in a space where hundreds of millions of people are producing content every day, a significant portion of which has been optimized, refined, and engineered to capture exactly the same audience you are trying to reach. In that environment, sameness is invisible. Perfect execution of a familiar formula disappears. The thing that cuts through is not better optimization, it is distinctiveness. And distinctiveness cannot be manufactured through strategy. It can only come from something that is genuinely, specifically, irreducibly you. Let us be concrete about what this means. Think about the creators or voices that have genuinely stopped you mid-scroll. The ones where you found yourself watching to the end, where you came back, where you told someone else about what you encountered. What they almost never have in common is flawless production quality or perfectly on-trend content. What they almost always have in common is the unmistakable sense that there is a real person here, someone with a specific perspective, a specific way of seeing the world, a specific voice that you could not have predicted or replicated. They are not performing. They are thinking out loud. They are working something out in real time. They are saying things that most people would have edited before the words reached the screen. And precisely because they are doing that, you trust them. because your nervous system, which has become exquisitely sensitive to performance versus authenticity after years of digital saturation, can tell the difference, even when your conscious mind cannot articulate how. This is where the concept of high-value identity enters. And I want to be careful with this term because it is often used in ways that reduce it to a kind of personal branding strategy, a set of aesthetic and behavioral choices you adopt to appear more desirable or authoritative. That is not what high-value identity means in this context. High-value identity is not a presentation. It is not a brand. It is a relationship with yourself that is stable enough, grounded enough, and honest enough that it does not require external validation to remain intact. It is the state of knowing who you are, what you think, what you value, and what you are building clearly enough that you do not need the algorithm's approval to confirm it. The woman operating from high-value identity posts because she has something to say, not because the content calendar demands it. She does not adjust her opinions because a comment thread pushed back. She does not pivot her entire content direction because one video underperformed. She is not indifferent to her audience. She genuinely cares about connecting with them. But she does not confuse the audience's response with the measure of her own worth or the validity of her own perspective. She can hold both things at once. I care about communicating well, and my value does not depend on whether this particular attempt landed. Imagine a woman named Vivian. She built a following of roughly 40,000 people over 3 years of consistent, carefully optimized content. She knew her analytics. She knew her top-performing formats. She knew exactly the kind of caption that generated saves and shares. And she was quietly miserable. Not dramatically, not in a way she could easily defend to someone who would reasonably point out that 40,000 followers is a success, but miserable in the specific way of someone who has spent years in a role that requires suppressing the most interesting parts of themselves to remain acceptable to an audience. She had built a following, but she had built it around a version of herself that she had to perform rather than inhabit. And every time she sat down to create, she felt the gap between who she was in that space and who she was everywhere else. And the gap felt like a kind of low-level dishonesty she could not name out loud, because it would require admitting that the thing she had built was built on a foundation that was not quite solid. What Vivian eventually did after a long period of resistance was stop optimizing for performance and start optimizing for truth. She posted something that she had been holding back for over a year, an honest, unresolved account of a professional failure that did not have a tidy redemption arc attached to it. She expected the engagement to drop. Some of it did. But what happened alongside that was something she had not experienced in years. People wrote to her, not with generic, positive responses, but with the particular kind of message that comes when someone recognizes themselves in what you said. Real recognition, the kind of response that makes you feel less alone rather than more visible. And Vivian realized that she had been building reach for 3 years while avoiding connection. The moment she let something real through, connection arrived almost immediately. This is the specific shift that marks the transition from algorithm performance to high-value identity. It is the move from reach as the primary goal to resonance as the primary goal. Reach asks, how many people saw this? Resonance asks, did this actually land somewhere true in another person's experience? Reach is a metric, resonance is a relationship. And relationships, genuine ones built on mutual recognition and real communication, are the only sustainable foundation for anything worth building in the digital space. The transition requires something that feels dangerous until you have done it enough times to trust it, and that is the willingness to be specifically yourself rather than broadly acceptable. Broad acceptability sounds like a worthy goal. It sounds like inclusivity, like accessibility, like good communication. But in practice, content designed to be acceptable to the maximum possible number of people tends to be acceptable to all of them in a very shallow way. It does not require anything of the reader. It does not disturb or challenge or deeply recognize anyone. It is, at best, pleasant. And pleasant does not build the kind of audience that stays, that trusts you, that follows you across platforms and formats and the inevitable evolutions of who you are over time. Specific, on the other hand, is magnetic. When you write or speak or create from a place that is genuinely specific to your experience, your way of thinking, your particular angle on a subject, something counterintuitive happens. The specificity does not narrow your audience, it deepens it. The people who are the right fit for what you are doing feel it immediately and completely. They do not feel like one of many people who mildly enjoyed something. They feel seen. And feeling seen is one of the most powerful relational experiences a human being can have. It is what converts a casual viewer into a loyal one. Not a viral moment, not a perfectly executed trend, a moment of genuine recognition between your real interior and someone else's. There is another dimension to this transition that deserves attention, and it is the relationship between performance and energy. When you are performing, you are always expending more energy than the output appears to require. This is because performance involves a continuous layer of monitoring. Am I coming across correctly? Is this landing the way I intended? Should I have said that differently? What does the silence mean? Why did that person unfollow? The monitoring is exhausting even when it is unconscious, and it drains exactly the kind of resource you need most to do genuinely good creative work, which is presence. Deep, relaxed, unmonitored presence in your own material. When you stop performing and start expressing, the energy equation reverses. Creation becomes replenishing rather than depleting, not because it is easier, genuinely good work is often hard, but because the effort is going toward the work itself rather than toward managing an imagined audience's response. You finish a piece of content and you feel like you made something rather than like you survived something. That feeling is both its own reward and a practical signal. It tells you that what you just did came from the right place. And when content comes from the right place, even an audience that cannot articulate why knows it. Think about what it actually looks like, practically and specifically, to make this transition in your own digital life. It does not mean abandoning all strategy. It does not mean posting without intention or refusing to understand your platform. It means reversing the order of operations. Instead of starting with what performs well and then finding yourself inside that framework, you start with what is actually true for you right now, what you are genuinely thinking, wrestling with, building, or discovering, and then you find the most honest and effective way to communicate it. Strategy becomes the vehicle, truth becomes the driver. That reversal sounds simple. It is, in practice, a significant shift in how you relate to the creative process, and it requires repeatedly choosing the more vulnerable option when the safer, more optimized version is always available. It also requires developing a tolerance for the specific discomfort of not knowing how something will land before you put it out. Performance feels safer because it is based on existing data about what has worked before. Expression involves genuine uncertainty, the kind that comes from doing something real rather than something calculated. And real things, by their nature, cannot be fully controlled. They may not land the way you hoped. They may generate responses you did not anticipate. They will sometimes reach exactly the wrong people and sometimes reach the exactly right ones in ways you could not have engineered. That uncertainty is not a problem to be solved. It is evidence that something real is happening. The women who make this transition fully, who move from algorithm performance to genuine high-value identity, report something consistent in how their relationship with their digital work changes. It stops feeling like a job they have to show up to and starts feeling like an extension of their thinking, their becoming, their actual life. The work and the self stop being intention, and from that integrated place, something becomes possible that was never possible from performance. Not just better content, a better relationship with your own voice, a clearer sense of who you are and what you actually have to offer. An audience that is small or large, but genuinely yours. Not one you captured by being palatable, but one you earned by being real. The algorithm will always reward what spreads fastest, but you are not building for the algorithm. You are building for the long version of your life, the one where who you are online and who you are everywhere else are the same person. That coherence, that integration is not just a creative goal, it is a psychological one. And everything that comes next in this series builds on exactly that foundation. If this episode gave you the push to stop hiding behind optimization and let something real through, leave the word mine in the comments. That one word is enough. It tells me you're making the shift. Subscribe, because the next episode goes directly into the territory of what that real voice actually sounds like and how to build it from the ground up.